16 months ago, Benjamin Netanyahu sent a letter to a member of the United States Congress. He wasn't asking, he was telling them what to do. What you're about to hear is not a theory, it is not speculation, it is documented in the congressional record, and as of this week, it is now law waiting on one signature away from the president's desk because the House of Representatives already voted. Today we're talking about what may be the most consequential and most deliberately obscured transfer of American sovereignty in modern history. We're talking about a nation where 123 countries stood on one side and 3 stood on the other, the United States and Israel among them, refusing to call the worst thing humanity has ever produced by its name. And we're going to connect every one of those dots because they were never meant to be connected. Let's start at the beginning. Segment 1, the letter. For years, members of Congress from both parties have said the same thing. The United States should stop sending Israel a blank check. That American taxpayer dollars shouldn't fund weapons used against civilians. That conversation happened in public, on camera, in hearings. While that conversation was being performed for the cameras, something else was happening behind the scenes. In May of this year, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a formal letter to Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana. In it, Netanyahu said he welcomed the proposed shift in the U.S.-Israel relationship, from foreign aid to what he called full military partnership. He didn't just praise the idea, he called it my plan. Read that again. A foreign head of state describing American defense legislation as his own plan, a week after meeting with the congressman who then introduced it. That language became Section 224 of the House version of the fiscal year 2027 National Defense Authorization Act, the annual bill that funds the entire U.S. military. It has since been renumbered. It's now Section 219, and this week it passed. Segment 2, what it actually does. The people promoting this provision have talking points ready. They'll tell you Section 219 doesn't merge the U.S. and Israeli militaries. They'll tell you it just adds oversight. Who wrote those talking points? AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the same organization that has poured tens of millions of dollars into congressional primaries this cycle alone, from Illinois to New Jersey to Chicago. So let's set the talking points aside and look at what the provision actually says. Section 219 creates something called the United States-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. It requires the Secretary of Defense to name a permanent executive agent, a single Pentagon official, whose job is to coordinate and expand defense technology cooperation. Not just missile defense, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, autonomous systems, directed energy weapons, biotechnology, quantum computing. This isn't a one-time grant, it's a permanent structure, the kind that's extremely difficult to unwind once it exists, regardless of what happens in Gaza, regardless of what the public wants. House Armed Services Chairman Mike Rogers says this simply designates one official to coordinate programs that already exist. Critics, including Republican Thomas Massie and Democrat Khanna, call it a permanent lock-in built into a must-pass bill. On July 21st, the House voted 214 to 211 just to set the rules for debate, and that vote made sure Massie and Khanna's amendment never got a standalone vote at all. The final bill passed 216 to 212 on July 22nd. 6 Democrats voted for it. It now moves to the Senate, where a parallel version, Section 1217, tied to something called the Futures Act, is already sitting in their draft. This is not settled. This is exactly the moment it can still be stopped. Segment 3, who actually wants this? Here's what should stop you cold. This isn't what Americans asked for. A poll released this May found that only 16% of Americans want the U.S. to keep supplying Israel with weapons without restriction. 16%, 38% want weapons transfers stopped entirely. Another 24% want them conditioned. That's not a fringe position. That's approaching 2/3 of the country wanting less of this, not more. Their representatives voted the opposite way anyway. Segment 4, who paid for this? So how do elected representatives advance a policy their own constituents don't want? The answer isn't complicated, it's documented. IPAC and its affiliated network, the United Democracy Project and others, spent over $100 million in the 2024 election cycle alone, and 2026 primary spending is already tracking well past that pace, with single races in Illinois and New Jersey seeing millions in outside spending apiece. Their strategy is simple: fund primary challengers against anyone who won't support this agenda unconditionally, and fund the re-election of anyone who will. It doesn't win every time. Several AIPAC-backed candidates lost their primaries this year, but it needs to win enough times that the message lands. Cross this line and you'll have a well-funded opponent next cycle. That's not conspiracy, that's disclosed campaign finance data. Segment 5, the part they don't connect for you. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because these two stories are never told together, and they should be. On March 25th of this year, the United Nations General Assembly voted on a resolution declaring the transatlantic slave trade the gravest crime against humanity and calling for a dialogue on reparatory justice. It passed 123 to 3. 123 nations said yes. Exactly 3 countries voted no: the United States, Israel, and Argentina. The U.S. ambassador's reason: America does not recognize a legal right to reparations for historical wrongs that weren't illegal at the time they happened. Israel's objection was different, that ranking the slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity created an unacceptable hierarchy against the Holocaust. Sit with that. The same 2 countries that just locked in a permanent, expanding defense partnership worth billions in taxpayer dollars stood together at the UN and refused to say that enslaving millions of people was the worst thing this world has ever done. Meanwhile, the death toll in Gaza has passed 73,000 people since October 2023, a figure U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies have both called broadly credible. That's the backdrop Section 219 was voted on against. What does that mean for Black Americans specifically? It means watching as the same 2 governments that won't fund reparations for American slavery are the ones locking arms on a permanent military partnership. No debate, no separate vote. H.R. 40, the bill to simply study reparations, has been reintroduced in nearly every Congress since 1989. It is sitting in the House Judiciary Committee right now. It has never once received a floor vote. Section 219 got a floor vote in 5 weeks. Segment 6, what to do with this? I'm not here to tell you what to feel. I'm here to tell you what's documented and what you can actually do about it, because this fight isn't finished. It's moved to the Senate. First, call your senators. Ask where they stand on Section 1217. Second, pay attention to the language politicians use: partnership, not aid; cooperation, not obligation. That shift in wording is not accidental. It's designed to make permanent what used to be revisited every year. Third, understand that these 2 stories, a defense bill and a reparations resolution, aren't unrelated. They share the same 3 no votes. They share the same silence. The connections don't make headlines because keeping them separate keeps the public confused. I'm done being confused. My name is the Unheard. This is Unmasked.